I'll never forget that evening, the night my husband David destroyed our marriage in front of our entire family. The memory is burned into my mind, the clinking of silverware, the subtle whispers, and the tension that hung in the air like a storm about to break. I was in the kitchen, putting the final touches on the dinner I had spent hours preparing. Steam rose from the pot of beef stew, fogging my glasses as I stirred. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear laughter from our family gathered in the living room: my sister, her husband, our parents, and our teenage daughter Emma. David's voice carried above the others, that familiar mocking tone that always made my stomach clench. Is dinner going to be ready tonight? Or should we order pizza? More laughter followed, though I noticed Emma's voice wasn't among them. I wiped my glasses with trembling hands and carried the pot to the dining room. Everyone was already seated, David at the head of the table, swirling his third glass of wine. I could feel his eyes following me as I served each person, that cold stare I'd grown too familiar with over our 15 years of marriage. Just as I was about to sit down, David cleared his throat. Before we eat, I'd like to make an announcement. His words slurred slightly, but his eyes remained sharp, calculated. My heart started racing. I knew that look. I've been patient, he began, his voice carrying an edge that made the room go silent. I've tried to understand, to help, to encourage. He turned to face me directly. But I can't do this anymore. Look at yourself, Linda. You're nothing but an ugly, fat failure who will never amount to anything. The room went deadly quiet. I felt every eye on me as my world started to crumble. But something else was happening too, something unexpected. Instead of tears, I felt a strange calm washing over me. And that's why David continued, his lip curling into a sneer. I want a divorce. I'm done trying to fix you. Emma half rose from her chair, but I caught her eye and slightly shook my head. My sister gasped. My mother covered her mouth. But I just stood there, looking at the man who thought he was destroying me, not realizing he was actually setting me free. In that moment, David had no idea that his cruel words would become the catalyst for his own downfall, or how I would rise from the ashes of his insults in ways he never could have imagined. That night, after everyone left, I went to the small apartment I had secretly rented 2 weeks ago. Call it instinct or just years of reading the signs, but I had known something like this was coming. The bare walls and minimal furniture weren't much, but at least here I could breathe. My phone kept buzzing with messages from family, but I only answered Emma's call. Mom, her voice was shaking. Where are you? Dad's furious, saying you ran away like a coward. I sat on the edge of my new bed, feeling surprisingly calm. I'm safe, sweetheart. I just need some space to think. He's drunk, Mom. Throwing things, saying horrible things about you. She paused. But I saw your face when he said those things at dinner. You looked different, stronger. Tears finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. I am different, I whispered. I'm done letting him make me feel worthless. Are you getting divorced? Emma's voice was quiet. I took a deep breath, looking around the small apartment that represented my first step toward freedom. Yes, honey. I should have done it years ago. After hanging up, I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. David's words echoed in my head: ugly, fat failure. The woman in the mirror looked tired, beaten down by years of emotional abuse. But her eyes, there was something new in them. A spark of defiance. I pulled out my phone and Googled divorce lawyers in my area. My hands weren't even shaking as I wrote down numbers. Tomorrow, I decided I would start making calls. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life. David thought he had crushed me with his public humiliation. Instead, he had broken the chains that had held me captive for so long. The law office was colder than I expected. Or maybe it was just my nerves. MS Roberts, the divorce lawyer, sat across from me, reviewing my information with kind but professional eyes. Emotional abuse, she said, making notes. Public humiliation, controlling behavior, potential alcohol issues. She looked up at me. Mrs. Johnson, how long has this been going on? I twisted the wedding ring I still hadn't taken off. 15 years. It started small little comments here and there. Then it got worse. My voice stayed steady, surprising even me. Mom insisted on coming with me today, I added, gesturing to the waiting room where my mother sat. Funny how everyone's suddenly protective now that it's all out in the open. MS. Roberts nodded sympathetically. That's common. Now, about your finances. My phone buzzed. David's name flashed on the screen, along with his message: if you think you can survive without me, you're even more pathetic than I thought. I showed the message to MS. Roberts, who immediately added it to her notes. Document everything, she advised. Every message, every call. We'll need it. Just then, Emma called. Dad's at your apartment, she said quickly. Your old one, I mean. He's demanding to know where you are. He's not taking this well. I felt a flutter of fear but pushed it down. Stay at your grandmother's tonight, honey. I'll handle your father. After finishing with MS Roberts, I found my mother in the waiting room. Her eyes were red from crying. Linda, she said, gripping my hand. I'm so sorry. We all saw what was happening, but we didn't. Don't I cut her off gently? What matters is what happens next. On the drive home to my new apartment, more messages came from David. Threats, then pleading, then more threats. Each one made me more certain I was doing the right thing. That evening, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger. With trembling hands, I finally slid it off and placed it on the table. A strange light filled my chest. For the first time in years, I could imagine a future where I wasn't walking on eggshells, where I didn't hate my reflection, where I could just be. David thought he was punishing me with divorce. He didn't realize he was giving me exactly what I needed: freedom. The gym membership card felt strange in my hand. After years of David telling me exercise was pointless for someone like me, just walking into the gym took all my courage. First time the trainer, Sarah, had a warm smile that put me at ease. She was around my age, fit but not intimidating. Don't worry, we'll start slow. That first session nearly killed me. Every muscle screamed and I wanted to quit. But with each movement, David's words, ugly, fat failure, echoed in my head, pushing me forward. You're stronger than you think, Sarah said as I finished my last set. Same time tomorrow. I nodded, surprising myself. At home, I stood in front of my fridge, staring at the takeout menus I'd collected. With sudden determination, I threw them in the trash. Small changes, I decided. One step at a time. Emma visited that weekend, her eyes widening when she saw the fruit bowl replacing the cookie jar. Mom, you're different. I was chopping vegetables for a salad, another change. Good different. She hugged me from behind. Amazing different. You're glowing. The changes weren't just physical. I started seeing Dr. Mitchell, a therapist recommended by my lawyer. In her quiet office, I finally spoke about things I'd buried for years. What made you stay so long, she asked during one session. I thought about it. Fear, I guess, of being alone. Of proving him right. I straightened in my chair. But I'm more afraid of staying that person, the one who accepts being treated like nothing. Weeks passed. My clothes started feeling looser. The woman in the mirror began to look less like a stranger. But the real change was happening inside. Then came the first text from David in weeks. Heard you're trying to improve yourself. Pathetic. You'll always be nothing without me. A month ago, that message would have crushed me. Now, I smiled as I blocked his number. That night at the gym, I pushed harder than ever. Sarah noticed. Whatever's driving you, it's working, she said as I finished my sets. I caught my reflection in the mirror, flushed, sweating, but standing tall. I'm not doing this for him anymore, I realized aloud. I'm doing it for me. Sarah grinned. That's when the real transformation begins. She was right. I was done being David's victim. It was time to become someone new, someone stronger, someone he wouldn't recognize. Someone I was finally proud to be. The rain was pounding against my windows that night. I was just finishing my evening workout routine when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. Something felt wrong. That's when I noticed the car. A black sedan, parked directly across from my apartment building, headlights off. I'd never seen it before. But something about it made my skin crawl. I called Emma immediately. Mom? You okay? She could always hear the tension in my voice. There's a car outside, I whispered, though I wasn't sure why I was whispering. It's probably nothing, but... I'm coming over, she said instantly. No, honey, stay home. It's probably just the lights flickered again. And this time I heard something else, a soft scraping at my door. My heart stopped. I knew that sound. Someone was trying to pick my lock. Moving as quietly as I could, I grabbed the kitchen knife and my phone. My hands shook as I dialed 911. The scraping continued, more aggressive now. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's trying to break into my apartment, I whispered. 1242 Oak Street, apartment 3 billion. Please hurry. The dispatcher kept me on the line while I heard the lock being worked. Then, suddenly, footsteps moved away. Fast. When the police arrived, they found marks on my lock but no other evidence. The black car was gone. Officer Martinez took my statement, her face concerned. Has anyone threatened you recently, Mrs. Johnson? I thought of David's blocked messages and the increasing desperation from his family members. My soon-to-be ex-husband. She nodded knowingly. We see this sometimes during divorces. Would you like to file for a restraining order? That night, I barely slept. Emma stayed on the phone with me until dawn, neither of us saying what we were both thinking. David was escalating. The next morning, my lawyer added the incident to our file. This strengthens our case, she said. But Linda, be careful. Men like David, when they feel they're losing control. I had new locks installed that day, added security cameras, changed my routines, but I refused to let fear rule me again. That evening at the gym, Sarah noticed my distraction. Bad day. I met her eyes in the mirror as I lifted weights. Just some complications. I want to learn self-defense, she offered. I teach a class. I thought about the knife in my kitchen, the fear in my chest. Yes, I said firmly. I need to be stronger. In every way. 3 months into my new life, I hardly recognized myself anymore. Not just because of the weight loss or new clothes, but because of the confidence in my walk and the strength in my voice. Marketing position at Anderson Co. I read from the job listing, sitting in my favorite coffee shop. After years of David insisting I stay home, the idea of working again both thrilled and terrified me. Apply for it, Emma said, stealing a bite of my protein bar, another new habit she teased me about. Mom, seriously, you used to run entire campaigns before David. Before I let someone else define my worth. I straightened my shoulders. Maybe I will. The interview outfit I chose was nothing like what I used to wear, no more baggy clothes to hide myself. The blue dress was professional but confident, like the woman I was becoming. Mrs. Johnson, the interviewer, smiled. Tell me about your experience. For a moment I heard David's voice, who would ever hire you, but I pushed it away and began to speak. To my surprise, 15 years of managing a household translated into valuable skills: budgeting, organization, and conflict resolution. When can you start, she asked at the end. Walking out of that building with a job offer, I felt invincible. I celebrated by buying myself flowers, another small act of self-love I was learning. At the gym that evening, Sarah noticed my glow. Something good happened. I got a job, I said, still amazed. A real career track position. Of course you did, she adjusted my form on the weights. You're not the same woman who walked in here 3 months ago. She was right. That woman had been scared of her own shadow. This woman was unstoppable. Later, looking through old photos on my phone, I found one from last year's Christmas party. The woman in the picture was smiling, but her eyes were dull, shoulders were hunched, trying to disappear. I took a new selfie and put them side by side. The difference wasn't just physical, though the 30 pounds I'd lost showed. It was in my eyes, my smile, my whole presence. Emma came over for dinner that night, bringing a small cake to celebrate my job. I'm so proud of you, Mom, she said, hugging me. You're like glowing. I hugged her back, feeling tears prick my eyes. I'm proud of me too, I whispered. And for the first time in decades, I truly meant it. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, and with each passing week, David's tactics grew more desperate. Today was our first mediation session, and I sat across from him, feeling his stare trying to burn through me. You've changed, he said, his voice a mixture of anger and something else. Regret, maybe? I stayed silent, letting my lawyer do the talking. David had always used words as weapons, not today. My client is proposing a fair division of assets, his lawyer started, but David cut him off. Fair? After everything I've given her, he leaned forward, that familiar cruel smile playing on his lips. Look at her, playing dress up, pretending to be successful. Without me, you'd still be nothing. 3 months ago, those words would have crushed me. Now, I smiled. Mr. Johnson, my lawyer interrupted, if you continue with these threats, well, it's okay, I said, surprising everyone. I met David's eyes. You're right. You gave me something valuable. I paused, watching his confused expression. You gave me a reason to find my strength. The mediator cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Let's discuss the house. But David wasn't listening. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't, not the real me. This is just a phase, he spat out. You'll come crawling back. I gathered my papers, standing tall. No, David, I won't. And that's what bothers you, isn't it? As we left the meeting, my lawyer squeezed my arm. You did good in there. He's realizing he's losing control. I nodded, feeling lighter with each step. David thought he was fighting for assets, for control, for his pride. But I had already won the most important battle, the one for myself. The final divorce hearing arrived on a bright spring morning. I chose my outfit carefully, a fitted black dress that showed how far I'd come, both physically and mentally. Walking into the courthouse, I felt David's eyes follow me. I heard his sharp intake of breath. For the first time, he was seeing the full extent of my transformation. Linda, he caught my arm before I could enter the courtroom. Wait, we need to talk. Emma, who'd insisted on coming for support, stepped between us. Leave her alone, Dad. But I gently moved her aside. It's okay, honey, I turned to David. What is it? His eyes roamed my face, my body, my confident stance. You look amazing. I've been thinking, maybe we're being hasty. We could try again. I've changed. I almost laughed. Classic David, only interested when he couldn't have something. Look at you, he continued, his voice dropping to that persuasive tone I once found irresistible. You've proven your point. You're not a failure. Come home. Home, I repeated softly. Where you humiliate me? Where you made me hate myself? I shook my head. That's not home anymore. I was wrong, he insisted, reaching for my hand. I see that now. You're beautiful. I stepped back. That's the problem, David. You only see the outside, you don't see that I'm strong now. Independent. Happy. I met his eyes steadily. And I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. His face darkened, that familiar storm gathering. You're making a mistake. No, I said firmly. My mistake was letting you convince me I was worthless. Never again. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings moved quickly. When the judge asked if I was sure about my decision, I didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor. I'm very sure. As the judge declared our marriage officially dissolved, I heard David's sharp exhale, but I felt nothing but peace. Emma hugged me tight as we left the courthouse. You did it, Mom. I held my daughter close, tears finally spilling, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of victory. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, I took out the photo of that broken woman from last year's Christmas party. We made it, I whispered to her. We're free. The woman in the mirror smiled back, strong, confident, and finally, completely herself. David had meant to break me that night with his cruel words. Instead, he'd set me free, and I'd never let anyone cage me again. The days after the final court hearing felt surreal. The weight of years of fear and humiliation had lifted, leaving space for something new: hope. My mornings were no longer dictated by someone else's anger or approval. Instead, they were filled with small, meaningful routines that brought me peace: a cup of coffee by the window, a morning run, or a few pages from my creative writing class. Emma came over often, always bringing her radiant energy. She loved teasing me about my newfound independence, playfully suggesting I should write a memoir. Mom, she said one evening over dinner, you're a different person. It's inspiring. Her words filled me with pride. I had always wanted to be someone my daughter could look up to. Now, I felt I was becoming that person. At work, I found myself thriving. The position at Anderson Company was challenging but rewarding. My team respected me and my ideas were valued. It was a far cry from the years I spent doubting my worth, but the most unexpected change came in the form of Eric. We'd met at a networking event a month ago, and since then he'd been a consistent presence in my life, kind, respectful, and patient. He never pushed, never judged. He simply stood by my side, offering the kind of quiet support I never realized I needed. One evening, as we walked along the park's lit paths, Eric paused. Linda, he said, his voice steady, you don't have to answer right now, but I'd like to see where this could go. You've shown me what true strength looks like. I smiled, my heart swelling with gratitude. Let's take it one day at a time, I replied. For the first time in years, the future felt like an open door. Months passed, and life continued to blossom in ways I never imagined. My days were filled with purpose, my nights with peace. For the first time, I felt truly at home in my skin. One afternoon, while organizing old boxes, I stumbled upon a wedding photo of David and me. I hesitated, staring at the image of a younger, hopeful version of myself. She looked happy, but I knew now that happiness had been built on fragile ground. I placed the photo back in the box, whispering, thank you for everything you endured. You got us here. Not long after, I received a message from David, a long, rambling apology. He admitted his mistakes and expressed regret for losing me, but instead of anger or sadness, I felt nothing. His words no longer held power over me. I showed the message to Emma, who read it with a raised eyebrow. Mom, you don't even need to reply, she said. She was right. I smiled, deleted the message, and blocked his number. It was the last time he would occupy space in my life. That evening, as I walked hand in hand with Eric under a sky painted with sunset hues, I realized something profound. My story wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong, it was about rediscovering myself, and I had finally found her. The woman I had become was strong, free, and unshakably happy. My past no longer defined me, instead, it fueled my journey toward a brighter future. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Your journey matters too.